Me now is Florida Congresswoman Laurel. She's a member of the House Judiciary, Homeland Security, and Administration Committees. Congresswoman, you'll be voting for the speakership on January 3rd. Are you backing Johnson, and do you expect anyone to challenge him?
Well, I think it's important to start by saying this. There is one person in America who knows how President Trump feels about Mike Johnson, and it's President Trump. My observation is that they've had a positive working relationship together, but certainly President Trump's opinion, his perspective, his needs for us in the House will be a very influential consideration for many of us. I know this week we worked very hard to pursue and accommodate his priorities. We did have a bill come to the floor of the House that included consideration of the debt ceiling, and there were a handful of Republicans who wouldn't support that bill. So it didn't pass, and we had to go back to Plan C. But you're absolutely right. The first thing that we'll have to do when we come back from the holiday is get together on January 3rd, vote on the speaker, vote on leadership, and then proceed with our work. Certainly, I know there have been a number of members who have expressed interest in continuing the conversation about Speaker Johnson and where we go from here. But I think he's been working very hard to try to accommodate the needs of the individual House members and the priorities of the incoming administration.
So that sounds like support for him right now. That's how I read your comments. Let's turn to what has been a horrific murder here in New York City. Immigration and Customs Enforcement says the Guatemalan migrant arrested for allegedly setting a sleeping woman on fire in a New York City subway was previously deported under the Trump administration. An ICE spokesperson says the suspect was caught at the Arizona border in June 2018 and deported a week later, that's under Trump's watch, only to sneak back into the country at an unknown date. Sebastian Zapata, now charged with first and second degree murder and first degree arson. He's accused of lighting the woman's clothes on fire, then watching her burn to death. He tells cops he has no memory of doing this. President-elect Trump is vowing a massive deportation operation on day one of his administration. How is Congress going to help him track down these dangerous migrant criminals that are really creating havoc, not just for New Yorkers, but all over the country?
And this is a horrific example of the consequence of failing to secure our border, the consequence of allowing people to come across unchecked, unvetted, to sneak in and occupy communities all across America. And really, it's at a point we've been saying this entire Congress, how many Americans have to die before this administration takes it seriously? And thank goodness we are turning the corner into President Trump's administration, where we can put a stop to some of these reckless policies that we know have allowed this to happen. So step number one, how do we find these people? How do we start the mass deportation? Many of them are currently sitting in our prisons and jails. So the easiest way to start this process is to find those people who not only came here illegally, they committed a crime while in America and are currently sitting in custody. And what needs to happen is that we go get those people and we deport them, detain and deport. Now, for those cities that claim to be sanctuary cities, that claim they're not going to cooperate with federal authorities, that's where we as Congress come in. It is absurd that a local or municipal elected official thinks that they can defy the federal laws of this country. So as Congress, we need to make crystal clear that that's not going to be tolerated. And we'll start with those people who we know are criminals that we know need to go back where they came from.
So step after step, it's interesting. I wanted to talk to you about President Biden announcing the commutations of 37 federal death row inmates, reclassifying their sentences to life without the possibility of parole. One of those commutations includes Jorge Avila Torres, who was sentenced to die after he sexually assaulted and stabbed two young girls to death in 2005, that is. 8-year-old Laura Hobbs and 9-year-old Crystal Tobias. 4 years later, he strangled 20-year-old naval officer Amanda Snell. Just shocking. Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn slamming Biden for this on Hannity last night. Listen.
They went out and went forward with these commutations and moved it to life without parole, rather than having these individuals have the death sentence carried out on them. after they have killed policemen, service members, children. This shows you that Joe Biden has no regard for the rule of law.
No regard for the rule of law. Congressman, what are your thoughts on this?
I think Senator Blackburn is exactly right about this. And I will tell you, as a former federal criminal prosecutor, federal death penalty cases are extremely rare. These are the worst of the worst. These are people who were already in custody, many of them for very serious criminal offenses, murderers. They've killed service members, correction officers, children. So there's also a very, very careful, methodical, elaborate process before the death penalty is sought or imposed in a federal case. So what President Biden has done is to really throw aside the work. During my time, those decisions had to go all the way up to the Attorney General of the United States before we even presented them to a judge or a jury. So President Biden has thrown aside all of that careful case-by-case analysis about what cases had the aggravating circumstances or the mitigating circumstances, where was this appropriate. Any decision about commutation of a sentence or a pardon, for that matter, should be done on an individual case-by-case basis that thinks about and contemplates, what did this person do? What happened to the victims of this crime? Is this something that should we stand in judgment and set aside all of the work and all of the analysis that was done to bring us to this place? And here, it simply, again, looks like Joe Biden is not honoring the rule of law. He is not respecting our system of justice. That is what brought us here in the first place. And instead, in his final days, doing everything he can to subvert what should be the incoming Trump administration.
Right. We're just showing a full screen here showing 1,700 total acts of clemency. It's astonishing. Thank you for your considered thoughts, Laurel Lee. Appreciate your time and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you.
Thank you for that.